You're listening to Linux News Log, separating the Linux and open source signal from the noise.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I am your host Adrian, coming to you almost live from lovely Petaluma, California, here in Studio MC2 at QuickSurf Internet Studios. Linux News Log is a proud member of the Tech Podcast Network. If it's tech, it's here. Do feel free to head on over to techpodcast.com and check out all the other technology-related shows over there as well. Linux News Log is also on Stitcher.com. You can find us listed over at Stitcher.com, digital radio. For any of you who have the Stitcher.com mobile app or in-car radio, you can get the show over at Stitcher.com. Let's go ahead and get into the news for this episode. Over at Wired.com, Ubuntu Mur, I don't know how to pronounce this. Is this the future of Linux everywhere? Basically, this story is Ubuntu, and more importantly, Canonical is working on a new window manager to replace Xorg. And it's called Mir, M-I-R, and it's been causing quite an uproar. There's another replacement for Xorg called Wayland that Ubuntu basically has rejected, and they're working on their own thing, and there's been a lot of hoopla over it. Definitely check this out. Frankly, I'm not surprised. Ubuntu kind of has a history of, kind of rolling their own when other open source alternatives are either too hard to use or don't really meet the needs that they're trying to do. And it's easier for them to just roll their own than it is to try to get another open source project to, kind of come in line with what they're trying to do. So it'll be interesting to see how this all rolls out. Over at InfoWorld, I found this blog post. The GNOME co-founder explains why he dumped Linux for Mac. I also have a link to the original blog post over at Tyrannia.org. Miguel de Icaza basically switched from Linux to OS X, and he wrote a blog post that explained his reason for doing so. And a lot of, when I read his blog post, a lot of the stuff that he laid out was a lot of the reasons why for my day-to-day use, I use OS X instead of Linux for a lot of my day-to-day computing uses. I don't really have that much free time, and I just need stuff to work. And there are a lot of things in Linux that it's just hard to do. I mean, there can always be made an argument that I can use Ubuntu and everything for the most part works, and that's true, but then I don't have all the software that I use on a daily basis to do the stuff that I do, and I advocate that you should use what works for you. So in my particular case, and apparently in his particular case, OS X is working better for him than Linux. And in my case, OS X is working better for me than in Linux, particularly not on the OS level front, but just on the software available. And yes, there can be an argument made that there's lots of software, but then again, it goes back to it's a pain in the butt to use. I'm sorry, it is. I need to be able to shoot a show, edit it, and get it out the door in 2 hours or less, not dink around trying to get my software working. So anyway, that's that. Feel free to check it out. Shoot me an email, linux@quicksurf.com, if you agree or disagree and why. I'd be interested in hearing any feedback from the audience. From computerandvideogames.com, Counter-Strike Condition Zero is now available for Linux. It's a Valve title, and more Valve titles are coming to the Linux operating system. So Condition Zero joins Team Fortress 2, Half-Life, Counter-Strike 1.6, and Counter-Strike Source, with plenty more games to come. There are currently 80 titles available for Linux on Steam. I'm curious, for those of you who are Linux users and gamers, how Steam has been working out for you on Linux. Shoot me an email, again, linux@quicksurf.com. From Information Week Cloud, Amazon Web Services has cut prices for Linux users. That's right. If you are using an EC2 instance on Linux, your price has been dropped up to 27%. So you can get a reserved instance. A virtual server is for upwards of 65% less than the comparable on-demand instance using the AWS EC2 infrastructure at 6 cents per hour, which is not bad. From internetnews.com, Red Hat nudges real-time Linux forward with MRG 2.3. That's right, to real-time Linux, that is Linux with a deterministic timing component for an action to occur, is a big deal for a lot of industries, the military among them. Red Hat first announced its production-grade real-time Linux platform dubbed MRG back in 2007. Back then, real-time enhancement was not part of the mainline Linux kernel, but that has changed over the years. The MRG 2.1 release, which debuted in January of 2012, moved the real-time platform to the mainline Linux 3.0 kernel. And the new MRG 2.3 release announced this week, Red Hat is advancing to the newer 3.6 kernel. Pretty awesome. So definitely check that out. Which, ironically enough, at work, we're in the midst of moving to the new 3.6 kernel, and we've got some, in the old kernel at least, we had a bunch of real-time patches applied to it. And so, we're looking to see if we can get up on a newer kernel with all the real-time patches. So this might actually be useful for at work. I might bring that up at the next meeting. From the Open, IBM switches to OpenStack-based clouds. IBM has announced that it is re-architecting all of its cloud services and software to be based upon open source in general and OpenStack in particular. Just as standards and open source revolutionized the web and Linux, they will also have a tremendous impact on cloud computing. Yeah, it's because it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to get an instance of the thing working, unless you don't value your time. From Robert LeBlanc, IBM Senior Vice President of Software, in the company's announcement. Let me rephrase. A large company like IBM can afford to spend the time to get something like this working and get it into a state where they can sell it. A guy like me can't, basically. So anyway, that will do it for this edition of Linux News Log. As always, everything we've talked about is linked up in the show notes. You can find those online over at quicksurf.com. You can shoot me an email, linux@quicksurf.com. Please do subscribe to the show. And with that, I will see all of you on the next episode. See you then. Bye.